I am truly honored to have the collaboration of two dear friends who have dedicated their time and expertise to the two main aspects that are prevalent in this exhibition. One is obviously Iranian contemporary arts, and also the theme of women and how we can bring the community together within the relevant realm of the arts. So I first have the honor of introducing dear Dr. Homa Mahmoudi, who of course all of us know, but just to give this briefest introduction of Dr. Mahmoudi's background. Dr. Mahmoudi is a clinical psychologist and served as the chief psychologist at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Department of Psychiatry, for 14 years until May of 1998. Dr. Mahmoudi is also the founder and director of Transcultural Communication Center, a consulting and training institute specializing in cultural diversity, and former professor at the University of California in Los Angeles School of Medicine. That's UCLA. And this is the briefest form of giving Dr. Mahmoudi's bio, which is probably 3 pages long. It's a pleasure to have you here. And of course, Sandra Williams, who's honored us with her contribution to this exhibition, with providing us curatorial context for the show. Sandra is the assistant curator in the Art of Middle East department at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. She completed her master's, an MA in art history at the Institution of Fine Arts, New York University, where she worked on 19th century Iranian photography. Sandra has provided us with much depth and meaning in bringing and introducing this body of work to the community, and it's an honor and a pleasure to have had your contribution to this exhibition, Sandra. So welcome and welcome all. Our goal is to have a very organic conversation about what brings these works together in this room and how we can bring some basic understanding of the relationship between the works and how we can connect the work best to the community. And if I may, I'd like to start with Sandra providing some context about the actual curation of this exhibition and the works. Thank you, Sandra.
Sure, no problem. I don't know if this is on. Just let me know if you can hear me. So thank you, Roshi, for the beautiful introduction and the invitation to participate in our talk today and then the art brief generally. And also for selecting a really beautiful group of works. You made my job a lot easier and more enjoyable, so I appreciate that. Just in case any of you actually did read the catalog essay, I'm not going to go into too much of what I said in that, so I don't want to rehash it. So I thought I would just talk about a few of the works in the show today. Apologies to the male artists who happen to be in the audience because I'm not going to talk about your work today. Sorry. But one of the things that I found very powerful about some of the works that were included in the show was the way in which female artists use portraiture as a form of critique. And luckily for us, I think everything I'm going to talk about happens to be right in here, so you don't have to go far. So the first 2 sets of work I want to talk about is this set right behind me. It's Sapideh Salehi's More Portrait series. And then in the back on that left wall is Shadi Guderian's Be Colorful series. So what struck me with the female artists that were using portraiture as a form of critique was really how they were looking at the ways in which women are presented in society. So with these 2 series, they're using barriers as a means of covering up their subjects and as a form of critique of how women are presented in society. is one way in which you could read it. So in this series, it's portraiture of these models, but they're all turning away or covering their faces, or in some cases shown entirely in silhouette so that you cannot see their identity. And in addition to that, there's this layer of rice paper that goes over the portraits, the paintings, and that's covered in rubbings from a moor, which is a small prayer disc used by Shia Muslims. And so not only are we denied their identity, but we're also physically cut off from them via this tracing. And in the back corner on Shadi Gadirian's Be Colorful series, the two women over here, we get to see more of their faces, yet we're still disconnected from them by this physical barrier of a dirty window. And so I think for both of these artists, they're playing with the idea of a physical barrier within their artwork to really separate the viewer from the women. And there's a number of different ways in which this can be read in a number of different contexts, but I think what's really powerful is they tap into a larger discussion about the ways in which women are seen in society. And in this case, they're partially seen, they're not completely seen. Another artist is talking about how women are seen in society, but in a more, we get to see them more directly, is Shadi Yusefian and her triptych, which is a self-portrait triptych. On the far left, you have her presented as a stereotypical Cali girl, and on the far right, you have her as a young woman that you might see in Tehran walking down the street. And in the middle is a nude, in which you would assume that you might know a bit more about her because she's stripped of all the conventions. She's not wearing any clothing that would be a social marker or place her in the world, essentially. But instead of seeing her body, you're seeing the most conventionalized form of the female body, which is the Barbie body. And she's really commenting here on the ways in which every version of herself would be seen as a stereotype, because you're always seeing her from an external point of view. So the barrier here is not a physical barrier like Gadirian and Salehi are playing with, it's actually a societal barrier, one in which it's our preconceptions of women influence the way in which we see her. And so I don't want to take up too much more time, so there's one last one that I just want to talk about that's even more subtle in the concept of barrier, but it's the series on the far back wall, the black and white photographs. It's the Tina series by Tamine Monzavi, and in this series she documented for several years the life of a transsexual woman living in Iran. And so at first glance, you might just assume that you're seeing a woman sitting on a subway or a woman standing in front of a Ashura banner. But once you learn that she's a transsexual, you know that at some point in her life, her assigned gender, as well as her physical body, was a barrier to her ability to be herself within society. And so while she's living as a woman now and more true to herself, throughout the course of the series, you see that there are still moments of conflict in which she's conflict either with herself or with society, in which she's trying to gain acceptance. And so I think what's interesting about all these works is that they all look at, from a different angle, the presentation of women in society and the categorization of women in society and how that affects how we receive them. And so I think there's no definite statement that can be taken from any of the works, aside from that they all function as a way of encouraging us to reflect on how we see others, essentially. There.
Thank you, Sandy. I think one of the exciting aspects of the work that we try to do with each exhibition is to create dialogue beyond the existing. And not only building bridges between the Iranian community of artists with art lovers, but also generally expanding a dialogue generally within the international conversation, possibly in a smaller sense of the word, but nonetheless a possibility being created. It's important then to have the perceptions that Sandy was just pointing to brought up. And within that context, it's so important to hear and have the words of Dr. Mahmoudi within that realm. She was so kind to accept the invitation, and she's been so excited about it, and it's just lovely to have a partner, in a sense, in that way. and we'd love to get her thought about what she believes is important and what called her into this project. And thank you.
I thank you, and I would really like to thank Roshi for what she has done in this exhibition, especially bringing women and the arts to our Los Angeles, and also the very intriguing topic of draped and undraped, which I told her this is going to break our friendship because I love the title so much, and I thought, what does it mean as a psychologist to be draped and undraped? What layers are we talking about? And is it psychological drapes and veils that we impose on ourselves, or is it the societal, or is it the areas that our gender imposes on us? So it's a vast area, and it's a very interesting area. We can start with Jung and talk about shadows, all the way to looking at some of the critiques of Islamic art and Iranian art that they talk about. The most prominent and veil is the one that talks about women and the layers that's been imposed on her throughout centuries. If you look at some of the Iranian cultures, you can see that in the past 100 years, nothing describes the Iranian culture more than the concept of being draped and undraped. Whether it is the time of Qajar dynasty that we have one of the paintings from Qajar time, or the two paintings that is from Kashf Hijab during Reza Shah that women were wearing, overnight they were wearing Western clothes and walking around Tehran like they're from Paris with their hats and their suits. That's just gorgeous. And then moving on throughout Pahlavi dynasty, that women received some freedom and their clothing and their veil and their expressions, all the way to the Islamic Republic, where the veil was imposed externally, but the resistance and the revolt came into being from within Iranians, that they did all of the changes that we see today through the expression of the art, as well as poetry and books that they are writing. I have to also put this exhibition into another context. Both of my grandmothers could read, but they were never allowed to pick up a pencil and write, because women of that generation, pen was seen as the ability to write to other people, and so it was, they taught them how to read, but they were not taught how to write. So the whole idea of painting, and I don't know, when was it that women started writing? I know some of the women in Qajar dynasty wrote, and they were able to write, but most women were not allowed to write because it was a sign of freedom and moving on. With that, we have the whole expression of art, which was always in form of carpet and sculpture and architecture, and never in form of contemporary art that we see today. We move forward, and I want to jump to Los Angeles, and I'm so glad Linda Kamarov is the curator and the head of Middle East Art is with us today, because prior to her coming to LACMA, the first time that we saw Middle East art and Islamic art was the collection in 1973 that was purchased for LACMA. And the first time that Los Angeles was exposed to a work like this. And up to today, that we see so much of the Iranian art is being exhibited here, and also seeing so many of young people that I'm in touch with actually taking interest in what is Iranian art, who are the artists, and they want to invest in it, and they buy it, and they have a dialogue with the images that they see. And that's extremely important for our culture that we have come within such a short period of time with the work that Farhang Foundation has done with the Art Council, with the connections that we have had with the museums, and also with people like Roshi that have really brought and focused on Iranian women artists, and they brought them together with such an important message of draped and undraped.
Homa's works are especially important because within the art world there's a dialogue all the time about art. It's important for me to create this bridge to introduce the work of art and institutions like LACMA to other people who have not yet had the appreciation. So bringing context outside the scope of the art world is super important for the mission of ADVOCARTSY, which is attempting to build bridges beyond existing connections. I'd like to go back and, if I may, Sandy, what do you attribute the prevalence of the representation of women in Iranian contemporary art, in your opinion? And how do you feel, as a second part to that question, the artists in diaspora differ from the artists that are residing in Iran partaking in that work?
It's funny because we had talked about the questions that might come up, and this one I've been thinking about for a while, and I don't necessarily think that there is more of a focus on women in contemporary Iranian art than in any other art category. There's always, in the arts generally, there's always been kind of an obsession with the female form in general. I mean, one of the oldest artworks is a small statue of a woman, so it's an old tradition that goes back very far. And part of me wonders too if some of it has to do with selection, because there's just an interest in women from the Middle East, so we want to see as many different representations of them as possible. But I think also, so part of it is selection, some of it is choice on the parts of the artist, and I think some of that might also be a reflection of their own identity. 8 of the artists in the show are women, so it makes sense that they would want to reflect on their own identity. And I think that is more characteristic of contemporary Iranian art, that there's a really strong group of female artists that are contemporary Iranian artists, much more so than might get representation in other fields. Not to say that they're not there, but I think that the female contemporary artists that are out there have made great strides in making themselves known and really breaking onto the art scene in ways that maybe might be more difficult in other fields. And then as far as diaspora art goes, again, because I'm in an encyclopedic museum, we don't draw a distinction between diaspora and Iran-based artists. They're the same for us in terms of how we collect, and I think subject-wise, there's a lot of crossover, and I think a lot of it is just a reflection of contemporary life. They're interested in some of the same topics. There's definitely some things that are touched on more, but I can't put my finger on it. It's like there's this one subject that diaspora artists always talk about. It's a bit of a mix. So sorry, that's not helpful.
No, that's interesting, because there's always been some conversation about artists outside Iran having a different representation of possibly certain aspects of work creeping into their in their body of work, and it's interesting to hear that you haven't seen that actually come through in your experience.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you could say is that maybe diaspora artists lean towards nostalgia more. They're more nostalgic towards something that they might have lost, but I think that's also true. You'll find artists in Iran that are also looking at nostalgia, or using it as a tactic in their art, so that you can find crossover between the two groups. I think it's a gray area rather than black and white.
Great. Dr. Mahmoudi, you are so well in tune with the community, the vibe of the community, and what moves people as a psychologist. And what do you think the role of art is in bringing some level of meaning in the experience of people who either are engaging with it by way of art enthusiasts, or how do you think art is adding to people's life experience in a way? I know you've been involved with the arts in so many different ways over the years.
You know, you indicated the community at large. The community has, after the revolution, when Iranians moved to Los Angeles, and pre-revolution in Iran, most people looked at Europe and collecting European art, and their focus was on decorating their walls with and investing in European art. And it's been after the fact that they became comfortable, especially in Los Angeles, after the fact that new identity of second-generation Iranians in a comfortable way emerged, that you see that Iranians have become interested in the Middle East and especially the Iranian artists. And fortunately, and we were talking about artists in diaspora and in Iran, the artists that have come to the United States and other countries, they have gone to school, they're educated, they're talented, and their work really reflects that. And that is a very important factor in what we see within the Iranian women artists and others, that their work really has a quality that is internationally appreciated, and people are investing in it, and when they stand in front of it, they have a dialogue with it. It brings out a lot of feelings, a lot of meanings in their life, and they would like to invest in them and have their houses reflect that and be surrounded by these images.
On the question of really engaging in a true sense with the arts, there's always, of course, the patrons and the collectors. And I can vouch that, the work that's done in the art world is very much dependent on a few dedicated patrons that support programmings by institutions, and really from the passion and the love of the arts are dedicating their time and resources. How do you define collectible art in the sense that what does one need to establish in that exchange? And I'm asking you both as someone who is involved in an institution, and of course once an art is placed in an institution, it earns the credibility beyond that art that may not. So it would be interesting for me to get your perspective each on what you consider to be pointers in how to select art as collectors, or what defines collectible art.
Well, I think anything is collectible, right? People collect everything, for better or for worse. And but I think the deeper question is what is meaningful art, and for an individual, what makes them fall in love with art would be most pertinent, I think, to the building their own collection. And I can't advise people on what to buy, but I would say just buy what you want to live with and what you love, because otherwise you'll regret your decision and have buyer's remorse.
This is a new concept in our culture. You have to understand that we have always looked at carpets and not really the pieces of art on our walls. And now the second generation and the new generation, they're looking at what the meaning of these paintings and what has the artist expressed, and they're really making a message. They're expressing their own values. What do I stand for? And also they're looking at a long-term investment in the pieces they buy. So, as Sandy says, pieces that are bought by museums or by they're represented in large galleries and in places like this, they have additional values. They have been selected among many as the best and as the ones that somebody, an expert, is representing them. So in that, I think people who want to invest and buy, they have to go through different layers of decision making. But most importantly is, what do I love? What talks to me?
I think during one of the conversations you and I had, you made a statement that was just so heartwarming. And I'm going to share that with everyone, is that collecting art is the highest form of self-expression. That you express your own self by the art you select and you choose to take home, regardless of all the other factors, of whether it's going to necessarily be the right investment. And I certainly want to see more of that. So thank you. And Sandy, since we are talking about the museum, can you give us a window in what goes through your process of selecting work as a curator, assistant curator of a main museum in Los Angeles that has dedicated so much of its resources to building one of the largest, if not the largest, body of Iranian contemporary art in the United States?
Institution-wise, yeah, it's the largest, so
Okay.
I have that distinct honor right now.
Perfect.
It's very, very subjective, and what we're purchasing is very subjective. A lot of times it has to relate to what we might be showing. But the main collecting principle for why we started this collection, actually why Linda started this collection, was to give a contemporary face to the historical Islamic art collection. So a lot of the works that we have now relate to that, and they give our audience, which is the general public of LA, a different way of seeing the Middle East. And so the works that we collect tie to that, and at the moment they our collecting focus is tying towards an exhibition that we're planning on Iranian art for summer 2018 that's coming up.
Would you be able to share any information on that
On the
with
exhibition?
us?
Yeah, it's about the intersection of past and present in Iranian art. And it picks up at the 16th century and goes to the present. So there will be a lot to look at when you all come.
We can't wait. And if I may ask, Homa, what role does the engagement and collecting play in the community sense for the expansion of communities' consciousness, really? How does engaging with the arts as a sociologist make an impact or evolve the community as a whole, in your opinion?
I think once people start looking at different kind of art, they make different decisions about them. But the most importantly, when you talk about identity, self-value, whether it comes from lower self-esteem or confidence, it makes a big difference on what you choose. By that I mean, people who are ashamed of their background, people who are not comfortable with where they have come from, people who are not comfortable with who they are today in the society, tend to shy away from their cultural identities that they belong to. However, when you become more confident, more successful, you tend to identify or be comfortable with who you are and where you are coming from. I think in Los Angeles especially, I cannot talk to about other communities, but I've been to, I see it in Paris, I see it in London, I suppose in Art Dubai last year. You see that Iranians are becoming very proud of their historical artistic background. and the expression that the artists are making to the various form of art. And they're investing in it. And they're happy to have a piece of art from the artists on their wall. And so it really represents many layers of who they are, how they feel about themselves, how they feel about their culture, and also aside from political and other layers, how they feel about their own feeling and expression and artistic values. Yeah.
Sandy, can you expand on that? Like, I know as a member of an institution, the community support and patronage is very important to the work that you do. How do you suggest we boost that and the impact of engagement with the work that you're doing? Can you give us a heartfelt exchange about that? I do know that there's always so much room for the support of the work, like institutions like yours. Funding is always an issue. And we, of course, are committed to seeing more great art and more dialogues being built. So let us know what impact does that make in your realm, and maybe what steps we could possibly see taken for that progress to happen.
Yeah, I think I'll do my best sales pitch here.
Yeah.
But, so I think one thing is that people might not realize that everything that we do comes from the support of very generous donors. So all of our acquisitions, we don't have a separate acquisitions budget. We have to fundraise for every artwork that comes into the museum. We've luckily been able to do that through generous donors that have just happen to be interested in art from the Middle East, but then also we have a council, our Art of the Middle East Council, which we're always looking for new members, and we do fun dinners and things like that if anybody wants to join. And then also our exhibitions require outside support, our publications, everything that we do essentially requires somebody to believe in the project.
So the museum doesn't naturally fund your programming?
In some cases there is, in some cases there's not. Most of the time they want you to find external funding. So it's always nice to have people that believe in our projects and who are willing to support us. And I think now is a really great time to start to support the institutions that you believe in, because, for example, we might not have federal funding for some things that we're looking to do in the future, and so we'll be relying more on private donors to help us make our projects happen. So I think if you look at LACMA is this amazing encyclopedic museum. There's so many different cultures that are represented in it. And one of the things that we're constantly trying to do is engage with the community on as many different levels as possible. Bring in new artwork that might introduce them to a new aspect of society that they might not have seen. For example, contemporary Iranian art is not really shown in LA at all before LACMA started showing it. So we need to keep that dialogue going, and to do that we constantly need support from the outside. So we're always looking to have people help us and continue the dialogue that we have, not just with the Iranian community, but really the entire LA community, which is very diverse.
How do people find out about your programmings? How do they reach you? I know you have an existing exhibition at LACMA right now.
Yes, yeah. So there's a show up right now of an Iranian contemporary artist, YZ Kami, which is coming down next month. So get there quickly if you want to see it. After that, we'll have a show of a contemporary Saudi artist, Abdel Nasser Garam, and if you want to know more information about exhibitions, you can go on LACMA.org, but of course if you want to know more about joining our council or supporting anything that we do, you can find me afterwards. There's some other LACMA staff here that you can find, and we'll give you the appropriate email.
Thank you, and I'm going to open up to a few questions after this question to you. What do you suggest, in your experience, is the best way for the connection and the support of Iranian contemporary art from the community?
One of the, this is a new phenomenon in our culture, joining and being member of museums, receiving their newsletters, going to exhibitions. It's just beginning in our communities. And I think we need to work harder with our next generation, with younger mothers and people in their 30s, to connect them with their past and the culture, and also connect them with our museums. It is something that their parents didn't take them to museums when they were growing up. It is something that appreciation of art was not part of our culture as much. And I think it is a vacuum and a void in our society and community that needs to be addressed and really encouraged.
I can vouch to the participation in this exhibition that we have had the immense support of the community, of course, and most of the collections of art that was sold during this exhibition was sold mostly to individuals under the age of 40, which is very heartwarming for me because it just shows the generation expanding, and we're building a new generation of art lovers and art collectors, and they visited with babies in hand, and they brought the kids here, so it was really lovely and heartwarming to see as an expansion into the next generation. And I'm going to open to a few questions from we close. Omi, please.
I wanted to ask a question, but I want to quickly also just say something from the bottom of my heart. I want to thank all the artists that are in this show, the artists that are present, and artists all over the world, everywhere that are working right now. As always, that history has given us something that's ultimately is priceless. You know, we come here and we talk beautifully about these works and about the sometimes the commerce aspect of it, which I know is important. But I think every time that I look at any piece of art that touches me, I realize really, truly, there is no price to be put on any piece of art, because the service that it provides to us as human beings, what it gives us to take away, what it gives us as a place of comfort, as a place of inquiry, as a place of joy, as a place of appreciation of all the beauty that is in this world, is truly something that we can't even talk about in terms of numbers. So, especially in times like this, I just want to make sure that we acknowledge, and I know that we've done that, but it's never enough. All of the people that are making art all over the world, and the gift that they give to us every single day. So thank you guys. Really.
Thank you,
and thank you, Roshi, thank you, ADVOCARTSY, and everyone here that comes and supports. That's definitely part of making that possible and making that an ongoing aspect of our society. And it's really, really, really necessary, more than I can say. Thank you for that. I also wanted to ask Ms. Williams if it's possible.
Honored by the presence of exceptionally just dedicated members in the community here. I'm Mr. Razi, thank you for your presence. Anusha Razi, thank you for your presence. Linda Kamal, I'm grateful. Shadi. Suzanne Eskin from CAFM, thank you for being here and always being such a support. So many dear friends here. I'm going to take one more. I just had to share that because it just took over me. Thank you. Exceptional support. The press has been exceptionally generous with covering this exhibition. The artists who are not here have just been pouring out with their excitement from all over the world. We had collaboration with two galleries, which is Robert Klein Gallery in Boston, with the photography of Shadi Radirian, Tahmin Monzavi, and Golnar Gohardashti, I apologize. And also Shulamit Nazarian Gallery with collaborating with Amir Fadlah's work, which has added so much to our exhibition. Honestly, one point that I want to drive home is there has been such amazing outpouring of collaboration that I want to give my thanks to everybody. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your time on a rainy day. And I can't wait to share the next thing with you all.